Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's now 2:57 in the afternoon. We're 2:58. We're just about ready to start our last session of a series of 4 seminars on stop disciplining and start managing. And today we have a very special guest, speaker, to handle our session today. But before I introduce him, it's only 2:58. May I ask, um, please type in the chat box because I'm sure Dr. Grio would like to know where you are all coming from. Kindly please type in the chat box the school or city or province you are following this session from. I know we have a big group from, well, Dual Tech today will not be with us, but they will follow in the recording. Okay, we have from PWU, JASEMS Manila, Quezon City and Manila. We have Miriam College, New Valley, Canosa College, San Pablo, Laguna. Good afternoon to you, Ma'am Rhea. Miriam College, St. Mary's College of Maykawayan, Unida Christian Colleges Cavite, Saint Scholastica's Academy of Marikina, Centro de Cultura from Kawayan City, Isabela. Mr. Romulo Condat, good afternoon to you, our friend from Kawayan, LaSalle Green Hills, Punlaan School, and I understand they are following from, they're following this session as a group. Dominican School, Manila, Dual Tech, Joven, Sir Joven is here, Punlaan. Okay, great. So Dr. Grio has a good idea of at least a number of the participants we have today in our session. Our speaker is one of the very few accredited speakers of the Center for the Fourth and Fifth Arts Asia, as well as Character Education Partnership Philippines. He is also one of the accreditors of School of Character accreditation of CEP and Center for the Fourth and Fifth Arts. And right now he is serving as the Vice Dean of the School of Education of the University of Asia and the Pacific. Please welcome our speaker today, Dr. Ernesto Grio.
Thank you so much, Man, and good afternoon to everyone. Let me just share my screen. All right, so we begin promptly by taking a look at an initial view of the last module for this particular series of seminars regarding classroom management. Stop disciplining, start managing. And the fourth and the last session or module has something to do with student ownership and responsibility. So what we're going to talk about is basically a summary, particularly of the techniques, the methods, or the strategies that I will lay down later on in order for us to strengthen our capability, our capacity in managing our students later on. So I would like to begin by taking a look. Let me just fix that. I would like to begin by taking a look at at the at a very important idea. And this particular idea, we have to begin with it because this is actually the foundation or the foundational idea of classroom management, or rather the foundational idea of successful teaching. I believe and I did agree with Man when he came up with this particular seminar or series of seminars focusing on classroom management, that indeed teachers need to improve their knowledge and skills in managing the classroom, in managing their students, particularly because of the unanimous result in research. And it has something to do with the fact that when you talk about successful teaching and learning, it can never occur and it will never occur unless the teacher has created a conducive environment for learning. And therefore, the foundational idea of successful teaching is precisely about classroom management. But because we're looking at responsibility and we're looking at ownership, I think it is important that we have to realize that it is not only about skills. So for example, number one, starting the class on time. Or number two, transitioning from one activity to another activity in order for the teacher to preserve the flow of the lesson. Or number three, grabbing and maintaining the attention of the students, etc. It is not only about those skills, because we have to take a look at another important aspect of what we call the foundation of successful teaching and learning, and none other than the teacher. So therefore, in this particular session that we're going to focus on ownership and responsibility. We are going to talk about knowledge, skills, dispositions in terms of classroom management. But at the same time, we're going to focus on the teacher as a warm demander, as someone who cares, as someone who is enthusiastic about his own teaching or her own teaching, at the same time enthusiastic about the development and growth of the people under him or the students. As you can clearly see in this particular slide, I think you will agree with me that when you talk about the warm demander, and later on we will clarify the plus, students don't care actually how much you know until they know how much you care. So we're going to focus on certain key characteristics of the teacher that actually enhances his classroom management knowledge and skills. And we have to be reminded of the importance of that warm demander, because an idea from Horace Mann came up while I was trying to prepare for this particular session. And Horace Mann said, teachers teach because they care. And Horace Mann believes that the primary characteristic of a good teacher is actually someone who cares. So the warm demander is synonymous to the caring teacher. Synonymous to the caring teacher. And we are all familiar with the work of Horace Mann. If, let us say, we know that the Americans established the public school system here in the Philippines, Horace Mann was responsible for establishing a good public school system in the US, and particularly, okay, coming up with the first teachers college in the US. So we know that he knows what he is talking about. So teachers teach because they care. And in this particular session then, we will try to take a look at classroom management and the characteristics of that effective teacher, that what we call a warm demander. And we will do so by focusing on a couple of very important goals in classroom management. And the first one is what we call ownership of learning. Ownership of learning. Promoting student ownership of learning. And the second one is what we call promoting student responsibility. Not only his responsibility, but his responsibility to the other members of the class. Okay, so very clear. Student ownership and student responsibility. And in order to achieve or help the students achieve those particular goals, it is important for us to realize that we cannot do it alone. The teacher is not a lone ranger or is not the lone ranger. The teacher needs a sidekick, or the teacher needs sidekicks. There has to be accomplices. And the accomplices are none other than the students, the learners, the educand. And this is the reason why we have to go back to the second foundation, the teacher as a warm demander. the personality of the teacher. Because if we will just rely on the knowledge and skills and set aside the disposition or the attitudes, the beliefs and values of the teacher, I think it is impossible for the teacher to be able to enhance, to be able to help the students achieve those classroom management goals. And therefore, I would like everyone to take a look at this particular sentence. And I'm going to give everyone probably a minute or two to rewrite this particular sentence. Because this particular session is something that is basically transformational in nature. And we want to rewrite this particular idea and align it and fit it with basically the idea that Mr. Rentoy envisioned for this particular series of seminars. And here is the sentence that we need to rewrite, that we need to review, that we need to correct. Teachers must rely on their arbitrary authority to discipline their students. Teachers must rely on their arbitrary authority to discipline their students. So perhaps you have heard Mr. Rentoy or Man talk many times about the difference between management and discipline, or managing and disciplining. Many times you've probably heard him talk about what we call authoritative, the authoritative teacher, or the natural authority of the teacher rather than the arbitrary authority of the teacher. So I want you to take a look at this particular sentence or idea because it needs to be rewritten. And we're going to hopefully be able to revisit this particular sentence later on. Okay, probably the fastest 1 minute. And in order for us to be able to rewrite it, in order for us to be able to enhance, to be able to help, to be able to facilitate the achievement of those classroom management goals, we have to enlist the help of our students. We have to engage them. We have to motivate them. They have to be our allies, not our enemies. And the main weapon that we have in our arsenal is what we call making sure that we teach them self-regulation. And we will take a look at a very important idea that is related to self-regulation later, after this particular slide or the next slide. And when we talk about self-regulation, it has been established in the research literature the importance of this particular concept. Because when you talk about efficacy, I can do it, especially with the support of my teacher. Self-management, I can monitor my work. I can monitor my thinking. I can take a look at my action objectively, etc. It predicts not only academic engagement on the part of the students, but as you can see here, even the academic achievement of the students. And I would like us to focus on that self-regulation because it means that the teacher will have to share power. In order for the students to self-regulate or to teach them self-regulation, the teacher cannot say that all power inside the classroom belongs to me. Number one, procedures. All procedures will have to come from me. Number two, right? All activities of the class will have to come from me. Or number three, no choices in the project, in the performance task. Everything will have to be chosen for you by the teacher. Number four, number five, number six. So self-regulation would mean that the teacher will have to share power because it means that the students will have to be in control in certain instances, in certain circumstances, or probably in the majority of instances and circumstances once they are trained, supported by the teacher. So we're looking at the green zone. We're looking at what we call in education as the green zone. The classroom is the green zone. The laboratory room is the green zone. The advisory room is the green zone. Because that particular space where students congregate and they learn as a members of a community is a happy place. Joy in learning that they are proud of. They have pride because they belong to that particular community, or they are focused. They pay attention because they see a connection between themselves and what the teacher is talking about. Or if they feel that that particular connection is rather hazy, still they have a connection with the person who is trying to teach them. They have a good relationship with that particular person. And remember, I mean, calm, they're not anxious because it means if they are anxious, there is anxiety, there is stress, how can they learn? So we're aiming for that particular space called the green zone. And in that particular green zone, connected to self-regulation is what we call empowerment. Empowerment. Okay? Share your power. Empower them. Give the students some control. And in certain instances, be independent of the teacher. Because anyway, if you think about it, one of the biggest goals of education in general is self-regulation. Okay? Note, a teacher who empowers does not give up control. He does not give up control. All right? So, empowered learners. Now, the question now is, why are we why do we have to focus on empowerment? Because when you talk about empowerment, empowerment in terms of the three P's of empowerment is connected to classroom management. It's connected to classroom management. Number one, if I am empowered, I can learn production. If I am empowered, I have the capability to learn. Okay? Classroom management. How can I help my classmates learn? I have to pay attention because if I don't pay attention, if I talk out of turn, then my classmates will not be able to pay attention because I am disturbing them. Production. Second P, prosperity. How can I accomplish the project in order for me to demonstrate to the teacher that I know the knowledge and the skills and I can apply them? I can transfer them. Classroom management. How can I, in this particular group work activity, lead my classmates in accomplishing the class project? So the student is no longer just interested in himself, okay, achieving the outcomes or achieving success. But because of that particular perspective on classroom management, precisely he becomes an ally of the teacher in trying to come up with that particular conducive environment. He goes out of himself. And the third P is what we call promotion, personal development, personal growth. So how can I, okay, have a sense of ownership, for example, of the classroom community? Okay, classroom management. How can I enhance my classmates' sense of ownership of the community where they belong? Whether it's a social studies classroom, the advisory class, or the group in a cooperative learning group activity, etc. So empowerment then is very important. Students are in control. But take note, right? If that is a high expectation coming from the teacher, there has to be high support. Because if there is high expectation and there is low support, the classroom will crumble. The classroom will crumble. Okay? So if there is high support but low expectations, it's the same thing. It will not work. There has to be a balance between the two. I empower them. I have a high expectations for them. Okay, they're now on their own. It cannot be. There has to be what we call again, right? What we call high expectations, classroom management principle. Okay, I have a very good idea of what it is all about. I'm a warm demander. Okay, plus, therefore, I have to support them. Whom will you support? The plus, your sidekicks, your students, the learners, the educants. And this is basically what we want to look into when we take a look at the strategies later on. Very, very practical. There are basically, well, 13 times 4, around 52. I'm not sure if I will be able to finish all the areas. Okay, but at least we can take a look at the first 4 areas and basically the first 16 or 17 techniques or strategies. But take note of that particular goal: student ownership, student responsibility. And therefore, if we are going to achieve those goals, we have to empower the students. The only way they can learn how to self-regulate is through empowerment. And that empowerment is in the hands of a good teacher who has a very good knowledge of classroom management. Okay? But it will not work without the high support. And the high support entails that that particular teacher must really exert a lot of effort to be able to reach out to students, to be able to help them, to be able to guide them. And that means the warm demander. So the 3 Ps. So our essential question then is, to start leading and managing students, how can I facilitate and enhance student responsibility and ownership of their learning? We can probably have one sentence, and that's the big idea. But the essential question now is, how can I facilitate and enhance my students' responsibility and ownership of their learning? What is your big idea? I'll give you a minute considering that particular essential question. Okay, passes 1 minute. Let's now take a look at the goal: empower the learner. And we have 3 very important general areas as outlined by Mann. The first one are strategies for fostering student responsibility and accountability. The second one is implementing learner-centered or student-centered approaches to classroom management. And the third one, the third general area, is building a classroom culture of autonomy and independence. So what I did was to research what experts, researchers are telling us about the general areas. And what I did also was to take a look at quotations coming from famous educators or poets or religious person in order for us to humanize, to have a human perspective of that particular key idea. And then I will lay down, based on more than 30 years of experience in teaching in elementary school, in the high school, and of course, right now in college and the graduate school, practical techniques. So we will use loosely the terms teaching method and strategies. So I will call them just methods and strategies loosely. Okay? So let's now move on. And before we move on to the first one, fostering student responsibility and accountability, let's have a habit of self-assessment. So probably also a minute. Okay, let's take a look at the morning question. What do I want to learn about empowering my own students? And probably after the session, the evening or the afternoon question, what have I learned about empowering my own students? But let's focus on the morning question, just for you to be able to have a connection, okay, especially with your extensive teaching experience and knowledge of what classroom management is all about. What do I want to learn about empowering my own students? Maybe you can jot them down in your laptop, and then later on, you can go back to your notes or ideas. Okay. So let's now take a look at the first one, part one, responsibility, okay, and accountability, okay, or ownership. Okay. Number one, number two, number three, number four. I want you to take a look at these four ideas initially. We're going to take a look at, in order to promote responsibility and accountability, it is important that we focus on the teacher, the warm demander, enthusiasm. The second one is we go back to classroom management, but of course, we're going to take a look at the teacher. We're going to take a look at learning. And the third one has something to do with making sure that the students, when you teach them, that you pull them out of their comfort zone. Meaning to say, we have to stretch them like a rubber band. But that rubber band should not break. But that rubber band should not break. And then we'll take a look at a very important point, which is what we call fairness. Equity, not equality. Equity, not equality. All right. So let's now take a look at the first one. In order for us to take seriously responsibility and ownership, we have to start thinking about enthusiasm. And therefore, I would like now everyone to focus on these five examples that will give us an idea of what teacher enthusiasm is all about. Number one, number two, number three, number four, and number five. The students, they want to be in a classroom wherein they find the teacher or their teachers who are enthusiastic about what they do, about what they teach. They not only teach the content, but they teach with their life. So start thinking about that.
We'll wait for Dr. Grio. I think something went wrong with his Wi-Fi connection. Um, just a bit of time. Um, okay, I think he will have to get back in. We'll just wait for him to get back inside the Zoom room. Let me see. I have to make him co-host as soon as he gets to enter. Sorry about that. Okay, Dr. Grio is back. For a while, I have to make you co-host for a while. Okay. Dr. Grio, are you okay?
Yeah,
You
I'm okay.
can
Yes.
connect now? Okay.
Okay, let me just connect again. Okay. All right. I hope this works again. As I was saying a while ago, okay, let me just Mm. All right, so here, okay, let's just, okay, let's take a look at this particular research result and let us see and try to infer why enthusiasm is very important. And here, if you can clearly see it, that the students want that others understand them, appreciate them, and recognize their unique qualities, interests, and needs. And if you think about it, a person who actually can do that is someone who is enthusiastic about them. Remember, when we talk about teaching, when we talk about our profession as teachers, we cannot just focus on the content. It's actually what we call the context, the curriculum or the content, and of course, the children. So here, Emerson clearly captures that when he said, the great teacher is not the man who supplies the most facts, but the one in whose presence we become different people. And the enthusiastic teacher or the teacher with enthusiasm is someone who celebrates people, who whose attention is focused on not only on the curriculum but promoting the well-being of people. And we will now take a look at some of those strategies and methods. The very first one that I would like to focus on regarding teacher enthusiasm is the way we communicate with students, right? We promote their ownership of learning, the responsibility or accountability, okay? When we are enthusiastic about them, when we have that enthusiasm as a teacher. Why? Because it creates a good relationship with them. When there is good teacher-student relationship, then there is the big possibility that learning can take place. And one of the specific techniques in communicating teacher enthusiasm is precisely the way we use body language, the way we use intonation, the way we use our eyes, the way we use our fingers, our hands. Because how we say something to our students is as important as what we say. We communicate with our eyes. We emphasize something with our hands. The intonation of the voice clearly explains what is our feeling, for example. So that's the first technique that I think we need to underline, that we need to always think about when we talk about teacher enthusiasm. And there are other three, and I call them the big three. Because when you have this particular big three, the students will interpret you as someone who cares for them, who is enthusiastic about them, or enthusiastic about the lesson. The first one or the second one is, of course, you are dressed like a teacher. You shine your shoes regularly. You tie your shoes properly. In case you are wearing a necktie, you wear your necktie properly. The second one or the third one is you arrive on time. If your class starts at 1:30, you are inside the classroom or in the Zoom room at 1:30. And here, it's about a general feeling. It's about what the students could actually perceive. And they can clearly see that you want to be with them. I want to be here with you. That you create that particular climate or that particular you contribute to that particular culture in saying that everyone here is important to me. Everyone here is important to me. All right? Okay. Give you some time to take a look at teacher enthusiasm. And are there other strategies or methods or techniques loosely, okay, that you can probably contribute? So you can jot them down, and maybe, I don't know, maybe if we still have the time to take a look at them later. Okay. Now, before we move on to the next one, I think this particular research result is very important because enthusiasm, it's a state of emotion. It significantly predicts the quality of teaching of a teacher. When there is enthusiasm, joy, contentment on the part of the teacher, there is effective teaching. But when there is negative emotions such as anxiety, frustration, or even probably anger, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. And we need effective teaching in order for the students to be able to learn, right? Okay. So before we leave teacher enthusiasm, let us do a narrative reflection. Look back at your own teaching experience. Does teacher enthusiasm make sense to me? Is it an important aspect of classroom management? Because it builds good relationship between the teacher and the students that he or she handles. So I want you to explore further what is it all about by looking back at your own experience and tell a story or try to recall a story, okay? And take a look at the big three. The big three. Dress your part as a teacher. Get inside the classroom before the students arrive. I want to be here with you. Okay? Tell your own story. So narrative reflection. Okay. Let's now take a look at the second one. The second one has something to do with it is not about teaching. Sorry, it is all about learning. Okay? It is not about teaching, it is all about learning. Here, I want you to go back and try to take a look at the definition of learning. I know there are many definitions, all right? Something to do with acquiring knowledge, something to do with applying knowledge, or something to do with change, something to do with I don't know it before, now I know it, all right? So with that particular background about knowledge, we start thinking about learning. But in this particular second recommendation or area under that particular first general area, I want you to look at learning and try to imagine learning, okay, with these particular words. Number one, there is joy in the classroom. Number two, you unleash the curiosity of the students. They want to discover something. They want to do something. They want to discuss about something. So there is motivation on their part. They pay attention. They conserve their energy, making sure that they pay attention whether to your lecture or to their classmates when they are talking. They participate during discussion and they take down notes. Because here in the second area, under the general area, we are looking at your success as a teacher. Okay? We're looking at your success as a teacher, but we are not looking at the success only from the perspective of teaching or the teacher. And this is the reason why we're talking about learner curiosity or the joy that the student experiences inside the classroom. Perhaps a clear idea that will illustrate this particular point is when you plan a lesson. When you plan a lesson, you come up with the objectives, you come up with the activities, evaluation, etc. Because you want to be prepared for that particular class. But actually, when we say it's not about teaching, it's all about learning, A very important component of planning is what experts call as pre-planning. And that particular pre-planning has something to do with looking at, imagining, trying to trying to take a look at what will happen in the classroom rather than just coming up with a plan from your perspective. But for example, objectives. How can I communicate the objectives to the students so that they understand the objectives? Or more importantly, so that they will own the objectives. Or, for example, I'm going to explain this particular idea or concept, but how do I scaffold it in such a way that the students will be able to understand it? Therefore, what will be their questions? You anticipate, right? Because precisely when we talk about this particular area, when we say it's not about teaching, it's about learning, okay? You're now looking at it from the perspective of, again, empowering them. Are there certain activities that I can actually turn over to the students in order for them to really get involved in the lesson? So this particular point that we would like to make then means that your teaching is actually centered on learning. So it's about the mental set. The mental set is you are focused on something. And that particular something has something to do with the objectives, something to do with making sure that that environment is conducive for the students to achieve the objectives. And that you notice when the students are not achieving the objectives. And then you have to intervene or do something in order to help them. And in this particular point, then, everything is you place the students at the center. And when the students are placed at the center, precisely, you anticipate their needs because you are focused on them. Okay? So Alfred Mercier said, what we learn with pleasure, we never forget. Precisely because that particular lesson is centered on the student, you're looking at their interests, at their needs. In fact, there could be opportunities for you to give them choice in order for their voice to come out. Then it becomes pleasurable for them. So let's now take a look at the strategies or the techniques or the methods. The primary one is what I call, in order for them to appreciate the lesson, you have to do integration. They have to integrate. And when they integrate, these particular sentences reminds us about the importance of making a connection. Either the connection is between the life of the student and what we are teaching them, or what they have learned previously and what they are learning now. Okay? Or it could be a part of their culture or their background. An old idea, this reminds me, is this lesson seems to fit with, I could relate this with, because precisely when there is connection, there's ownership. The three other methods that are important to consider and reconsider, okay, the first one, the second one rather, is the cards or the notes regarding improvement. I think it is important for the students to take note of the fact that they monitor their improvement. Okay. Now, this is what I'm going to learn. Okay. And then later on, they're going to fill up a card and they will say, I have improved. Because, for example, I have learned how to add, I have learned how to read, or I have learned how to respect people, etc. Another strategy is what we call the classroom is a place where redoing one's work is a priority. There's no shame on it, or there's no shame in it. Meaning to say, okay, we are not after perfection. What we are after is the improvement of the person. If I have to redo a paragraph, I redo it in order for me to improve my communication skills. All right. If there is a need, for example, to redo in terms of the way I analyze that particular source document, okay, because there is an input coming from the teacher in order for me to improve, then I have to redo it. It's a priority. And therefore, what you are asking from the students is effort. They have to put in their best effort. The fourth and last one, or the third one in this particular slide, is connected to the third one. There is an opportunity to learn, because redoing is an opportunity to learn. But at the same time, you have created more time for opportunity to learn, for you to focus on the students, on their learning, and not only on your teaching, because you have taken care of the procedures. All right? You don't waste time, for example, in collecting papers. Okay, class? The count of five. Pass your paper. They don't pass it forward, for example. They pass it sidewards. And then you walk down the aisle collecting all the papers. Or you have a procedure, for example, if someone needs to go to the bathroom or the comfort room, etc. So you have created more time in order for the students and you to interact, or the students to interact with their classmates precisely with that opportunity to learn. So that's the big three. All right. So, okay, integrating one's learning, making use of now and later cards and notes. The classroom is a place where redoing one's work is a priority. The two are connected. Okay. But the third one is the procedures are in place. They are sound. And you don't waste time. The students don't waste time. Therefore, the time, okay, the time that is not wasted is something that they use in order to further their learning. Okay. So let's now take a look at the activity and the three little pigs activity. Okay. Uh, yes, I focus on student learning. I have certain strategies that I employ that I make sure that I maximize the time for learning on the part of the students, particularly when they interact with their classmates or interact with me. Okay. What are your highly effective strategies? The three little pigs, the brick. Okay. What are your, okay, let's forget about the middle one. What are the less effective? The straw, the house made of straw. What are the highly effective strategies? So based on my teaching experience, number one, number two, number three. But I have also committed some mistakes, and there are less effective strategies. The straw, one, two, and three. But more importantly, how can I rectify? How can I improve the least effective strategies? Okay. All right, let's take a look at, okay, give you some time to reflect. The more reflective we are as teachers, the more effective we are. So teacher enthusiasm and all about learning, and all about learning. Teacher enthusiasm and all about learning. Do I have a question? What is probably the most important idea that I have reflected on, that I have learned, etc.? My email address is ernie.grio@uap.asia. So in case, for example, there are things that you would like to bring up, you can give me a note, especially your reflection. All right. Okay, two down, two to go for the first general area, responsibility and accountability. Teacher enthusiasm, it is not about teaching, it is all about learning. Now let's now take a look at the third one. Get them out of their comfort zone. Take a risk. And we will take a look at a specific area there. Okay. So get them out of their comfort zone. Okay. They take a risk because that's the only way they can improve. And I want you to take a look at the following words, at the following concepts in order for us to have a peek into what does it mean to get them out of their comfort zone and they take a risk. So number one, they value learning. They make a connection. They exhibit flow. They experience flow. All right? They make meaning. And there is something inside the classroom that is relevant to them. Okay? So looking into these particular 5 words or ideas or concepts, it is important that if we are going to challenge them, we have to engage them. We're talking about engagement. We're talking about motivation. We're talking about movere because the when you talk about motivation comes from the Latin word movere. Okay? How do we move them? How do we make them talk? How do we make them work? How do we make them add or subtract or analyze or do the higher order thinking skills? And how do we make them go beyond themselves to try to risk it all? Okay, so we're talking about engagement. And I think it is very important then to go back to that particular idea, okay, that we set a while ago, the foundational idea, that the teacher is a warm demander plus, warm demander or a caring teacher. So in this particular point then, when we challenge them, when we engage them, it is important that we wear the hat of a mentor, not only wearing the hat, quote unquote, of a teacher, but rather of a mentor. Because when we wear the hat of a mentor, then a teacher takes up his role in order to provide students with confidence. I mean, they need that particular confidence and, of course, courage in order for them to get out of their comfort zone. And therefore, what we are trying to highlight here is there is a need to make sure and make them realize that making mistakes or errors are normal part of growing up as a student. Because when they commit an error, when they commit a mistake, they have to realize that it is a learning opportunity. It's a learning opportunity because the teacher will probably provide a feedback in order for the students to recognize that mistake. Or number two, that the students themselves notice the mistake because the teacher has actually taught them how to do it. Or possibly number three, that a classmate, a group mate has pointed out and then they notice the mistake and then they have that particular opportunity to grow because of that mistake. So when we engage them, when we challenge them, okay, it is important to focus on the fact that we act like a mentor. We provide them with confidence. We support them because in doing so, then they can actually tackle that particular point regarding I don't want to challenge myself or to try new things because I don't want to commit errors or mistakes. Right? So we have to take a look at it from the perspective of the novice, and that particular student who commits a mistake is bound to do so because of the fact that he is not or she is not an expert. And they have to realize that. Okay, so Igor Stravinsky said, I have learned throughout my life as a composer chiefly through my mistakes and pursuits of false assumptions, not my exposure to pounds of knowledge and wisdom. So let's now take a look at the teaching strategy or recommended method. Okay, so this one, challenging them by using various strategies. We cannot just rely on one or two strategies in teaching. Okay, so for example, number one, if we're going to challenge them to become more someone who can attend to the needs of other people, someone who can empathize with other people, we cannot do that by just using one or two strategies. Perhaps one strategy that will work fine with that particular student who needs to be more empathetic, okay, will be a collaborative learning group activity. Or number two, we want students to realize or to understand social issues, then we can probably use a service learning activity that they engage with the community aside from learning the curriculum or the content. So using various strategies because we have different kinds of learners, not only different types of knowledge. Okay. So the big three, the other strategies that I would like to recommend, the second one or the first one here in this slide is, okay, we teach them how to notice when they commit a mistake. And more importantly, what to do about it. Second one or third one is we never ignore minor problems, whether it has something to do with classroom discipline or what we are teaching. We address them. And when I say we address them, either by direct intervention, right? But better with the help of the student or with the cooperation of the student. And I think this one is very important because in that particular instance then, if we are going to engage them, motivate them, it is important also to catch them while they do good. We have to compliment them. We have to compliment them. Not necessarily them, but the good thing that they have actually accomplished. So the big three. Okay, are there other ideas that you may have? So you can list them down. Okay, so let's now take a look at, okay, to give you time to reflect on regarding, okay, stretching them, challenging them, something to do with engaging them. Let's have a version of Johari window. So the first one, the second one, and the third one. It is known in the public space. What can I say about teacher support? Okay, which I think everyone knows or accepts. Because when we talk about compliment them, point out the mistake, help them notice the mistake, and rectify the mistake or the error, etc., that's teacher support. And we go back again to that, the warm demander, right? So what can I say about teacher instructional support, which I think everyone knows or accepts? It is in the public space, but not clearly visible. What can I say about teacher instructional support, which I think may seem like controversial or even contentious? Not known because it's your story. What is a successful example of teacher support from my teaching experience? Give you some time to think about it before we take a look at the port one under the general area. general area number 1. So responsibility and accountability. So you have 1, 2, 3. Let's take a look at the last one in this particular area. Give each student what he needs. This is the best way of being fair. So being fair to one's students. All right, so take a look at the question first. What does it mean to be fair to one's students? And later on, we'll take a look at an idea that is related to being fair to students that I would like to emphasize in the fourth idea. And we have to see fairness through the following. So number 1, the dreams and aspirations of the students. The well, we should not only see the weaknesses of the students, but their strengths. Or we should be familiar. Hopefully, we have the time to talk to them and learn about their background, whether cultural, what the community where they come from, or even probably religious background. And we have to understand the data about them and how to use the data in order to help them improve. And it's about paying personal attention. All right. So all of these ideas are now related to what we call fairness. So let's now take a look at them. So I think the most important point that we need to reflect on when we talk about fairness is that when we teach, we are not actually teaching 25 students, or we're not actually teaching a class. Or if you have a fairly small class in terms of size, we're not teaching 5 students. You're teaching a student. And that particular student, okay, has strengths and weaknesses, has a background, etc. And therefore, children are different. So what we're trying to emphasize here is that the approach that you take when you try to help a certain student of yours must be something personalized. Personalized because you know that particular person, because you understand the needs of that particular person, and you have what we call a plan to be able to address the needs of that particular person or that particular student. So I would like now to take a look at it from the perspective of reframing. Because when we talk about reframing, it's about looking at the problem, looking at the issue, looking at the situation or the circumstance or the context from the point of view of someone else. It's from a different perspective. And that particular perspective is the perspective of the student. Okay? So how do I empower the students? How do I promote their ownership? How do I promote their accountability or responsibility? I think it is very important that when you become fair to them, you look at the problem, the issue from their perspective. It's about reframing. And this is a quality of a good teacher, someone who is a reflective practitioner. And when you do reframing, you are actually doing reflective. You're actually exercising what we call that particular quality, which is reflective practitioner. So it's about, okay, there is a behavior. Now, I have to have a question about that particular behavior. And it includes a question from the perspective of the person whom I actually am observing or studying. Then there are potential answers. And then we help resolve the issue. So it's connected to that reflective practitioners. And we always pride ourselves, teachers, as persons who are reflective practitioners. Okay? Now, if we do that, we have a different view, for example, of difficult or challenging students. We have a different view, for example, of differently abled students, or a different view, for example, of students who are academically challenged. And we can clearly see that these are the students who really need help inside the classroom. So let's now take a look at a quotation from Marva Collins when she said, "The good teacher makes the poor student good and the good student superior. When our students fail, we as teachers too have failed." So let's now take a look at the strategy or the methods or the techniques. Okay, so let's take a look at the five-finger rule. Do I know my students? Do I know their aspirations, their dreams? Do I know their strengths, not only their weaknesses? Do I know their background? Five-finger rule. Huh? Who are the five trusted persons in your life? Number one, in your home, in your community, in your club, in your family, extended family rather, in your school or in our school. Okay, because being fair means we know our students. We have a clear idea of who they are. Okay. Here are other strategies because we make them visible to us. I see you, I hear you. When we greet them, when we know their nicknames, and we don't call them, for example, by using a number like number 5, number 7, or better to call them using their nickname and then rather than call them using their surname. Okay. If there are discipline problems, best be handled discreetly. And if you take a look at the last one, proactive is very crucial. That we nip, okay, the problem before it really becomes a problem. So problem finding is as important as problem solving. Okay, right. I mean, when you talk about, for example, bullying, teasing, etc., when you talk about students who may actually fail in a certain quarter, etc., problem finding is more important than problem solving. So I would like now to take a look at this particular quotation because I think it is a very powerful quotation. It talks about making a connection with each student. So to be fair to them, we have to know them. Remember, reframing, reflective practitioner. I see each of my students as people rather than names on a sitting chart. It allowed me or allows me to share humanity with them, even the very young ones, and find a way to like every child in my charge. Meaning to say, I mean, it's really difficult to like them if we don't know them, if we don't try to understand them, if we don't try to find out things about them, if we don't have a connection with them. All right. So, okay. So this one, so this particular point, let's now take a look at you. Let's reflect on being fair to students because we know them. And let's try to take a look at Rudyard Kipling, the six serving men, when he said, I keep six honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what, why, when, and how, where, and who. I would like now everyone to use the six serving men to reflect on that particular point regarding being fair to one's students, knowing them, understanding them, making the time for them. The idea of reframing or looking at a circumstance, a context, an issue, a problem from their perspective. And let's take a look at what is it all about? Why is it important? When do we use it? How do we use it? Where do we use it? And who among our students need it most? Particularly the differently abled, the academically challenged, etc. So what, why, and when? How, where, and who. I think that particular who is very important right now, okay? Especially that the, well, the school year is about to end, or it has ended for many of us or many of you. uh, it's important to take a look at the specific students whom we have actually applied this particular idea regarding being fair to them. Okay, so being fair to one's students. All right. Okay. Do we have some questions, clarifications regarding being fair and opportunity to learn? Okay, we can write them down. And let's see if we will still have the time to be able to take a look at them later. Okay, now, so promoting student ownership and responsibility. Let's take a look at part two. And in part two, the general area of student ownership and responsibility, I listed down again four important areas, something to do with classroom management. Okay. So, number one, get to know one's students. It is more powerful than a lesson plan. Correct them privately, praise them in public. Make every day matter to students. Respect is given by students, it must be earned by teachers. So let's take a look at the first one, then let's see if we can actually reach the second one. So get to know one's student. It's more powerful than a lesson plan. Okay, I hope this situation is familiar to all of us. Because in getting to know one's students, I will focus on a related idea. Okay? Because we have already established the importance of getting to know the student in the previous principle. Okay. With the best of intentions, teacher feels for student because he or she is so far behind. And because that particular feeling is misguided, the teacher probably lowers the standards or probably allows the student to get away with mistakes. And therefore, even if the student, for example, does not deserve a passing mark, that particular student is given a passing mark. Okay? Now, I want you to take a look at that particular situation because I think it is important here that in this particular point regarding getting to know the student, if we know a student, it is important that we demand from all of our students. The only way we can empower them is when we demand from them all, not only the intelligent students in the class or the best performing students, but all students. We have the same high expectations for them. But with the high expectations, as I mentioned, comes the high support. And therefore, I think that is important because when we take a look at this particular point now, getting to know the students and having high expectations for all of them, it gives them the idea that I am important to the teacher. I am important to the teacher. He expects highly from me, but at the same time, he provides the necessary support in order for me to achieve the standards that he has or I have set for myself, that we actually planned, that we actually agreed on, and that we have actually set for myself. And therefore, if I am important to him, then there is the idea that I belong in this particular class. I belong in this particular class. If the teacher has high expectations for me, right? And therefore he challenges me, and therefore I am important to him, and therefore I belong to this particular class. I like to be in this particular class. So Ron Clark, I'm not sure if Mr. Rentoy was able to bring Ron Clark to the Philippines, or he was planning to. And Ron Clark said, if you can't relate to kids and meet them where they are, then you're going to have a tough time giving them to respect you or follow your guidance. And I would like now to focus quickly on the high expectations teacher. Okay? There is a demand. And that particular demand will actually allow the students to flourish or to blossom. It's called the academic press. We demand something from them. We demand good performance. We demand good quality work. Okay? But that particular good quality work, good performance, okay? Quality answer, for example, during discussion, or a quality product or performance, etc. That is a desirable difficulty, or it's a productive struggle on the part of the student. It's a struggle, but it is productive. Why? Because the teacher is there to provide the necessary support for me and my classmates. That difficulty is desirable for me because I can clearly see that I can benefit and I will benefit from that particular challenge coming from the teacher. So that's the first one. Now, there are other strategies. Again, I call them the big three. So number one, number two, number three. Okay. I think it is important that if we are going to provide that particular high support for the students, that we have to recognize that that high support should not only come from us. We have to engage the family. We have to engage the parents. We have to include the family in the equation. We have to get to know the parents, right? And more importantly, we have to make them our allies. We have to work with them. Okay. Support. Number two, it is important that once in a while that you chat with them, that you have a one-on-one meeting with them. Meaning to say, okay, instances like, okay, number one, you leave the room because you're already done teaching. Then a student, for example, okay, runs after you, and then he or she wants to talk to you. So, and then you still have time, meaning to say maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes before the faculty meeting. Why not spend 5 minutes with the student to talk to him? You want in a one-on-one meeting or one-on-one chat. You can actually create certain opportunities or carve time for this particular important point. There is no replacement for a one-on-one chat. Okay, number three, you allow your students to get to know you as their teacher. So your accomplishments, your dream, why did you become a teacher, your passion for teaching, etc., etc. Maybe, I don't know, as a class advisor, you have a picture there in one of the corners of the room, etc. Because it is important for them to be able to see you as a human being. So, because meaning to say, because some students would not would not, well, they would probably place the teacher on a pedestal and they would never see the teacher as someone who is is a person. But when you allow them to know something about you, they realize that you have the same struggle, okay? That you are someone who is actually like them, probably when you were growing up, etc. So the big three. Okay, what are the other strategies? So it's your turn. Okay. So a reminder for good teachers, create a positive relationship with each student. Each student. The classroom is not a sea of faces to talk to. But always, when we teach an individual student. We don't teach a class. So reflection through prompts. So focus on your learning and reflect on your feelings about getting to know your students. Okay. In doing so, accomplish the following using a sentence per prompt. 1, 2, 3, 4. I am surprised that. I believe strongly that. I am confident in. I need to. Okay. Quickly, we'll now take a look at correct them privately, praise them in public. So what is teacher praise? So always when we talk about praising them, especially correcting them, okay, I think it's important to make us always remember, try to reflect and to review that the true victory when you praise them, right, or when you correct them, and because of that particular correction, they improve, is not about the goals themselves, but it's about them or the person improving. Okay? It's about the person. So I think that is important. Now, so things like you did a good job, you were attentive in class today, you submitted your homework on time, you participated in group work, okay? So you did a good job, okay? Now, the main point about this particular area regarding correcting and praising them is when you correct and praise them, it's always connected to the long-term goal. Again, that particular point regarding personal improvement, personal development, it's connected to a long-term goal. Okay? So remember, when we empower our students, part of empowerment of self-regulation is none other than they have a plan and they know how to plan and they can monitor the plan. And therefore, tied up to that particular plan is basically not only learning about the content, but precisely what the school envisions them to be, right? So kids can be short and easy to speak. Kind words rather can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are endless. Praise them, okay? So teaching strategy, learning from mistakes. Important to learn from their mistakes, but take note, they cannot learn if we cannot take away that defensive stance on their part. We have to tear it down. And then we have to minimize or eliminate embarrassment. So these are the big three. Okay. Start the class with a spark, always end it with a bang by recognizing that they have contributed to the success of that particular class. Every day must be a D-day for you. So meaning to say, it must be an opportunity for you to make sure that you acknowledge their contributions. And then of course, when you make eye contact with them, or rather when you are inside the classroom and you listen to them, okay, you pay attention to them, there's always the please. So it's careful and active listening. Your posture, okay, you are listening, you are engaged, you assure them that you're paying attention, you are quiet, you maintain eye contact. Okay. So I would like to end here and I would like to turn over the floor to Man. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.